Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Between Two Chairs. My name is Fernando Arencibia Jr. Thank you for joining us. And with me, as always, is the always on the move, always out and about, Jennifer Woolman. Jennifer, say hi.
Hello, everybody.
You are always on the move.
I am.
All right, whether
So
you're
are you.
running in
Look
the
at
morning or you're, globe trotting around the world.
I think brokers are always on the move.
Exactly. Which is...
We're busy people.
We are, which is very appropriate because we just came from a great event put together by the Miami Association of Realtors called Broward on the Move. And it was all about the future of transportation and logistics. It was a wonderful event. It was really a panel discussion, and there were 4 key players in everything that is involved with the logistics and infrastructure surrounding transportation in and out of Broward County, and something that really affects all of South Florida. And so I wanted to just say that we heard from 4 panelists. One is Mr. Stephen C. Braun. He is the Florida Department of Transportation District 4 Secretary, involved in everything that has to do with the district here in South Florida. We heard from William Castillo, who's the Fort Lauderdale International Airport Capital Program Management Administrator. We heard from Dr. Natasha Jacinthe. She is the Executive Assistant Director of Seaport Planning and Capital Grants, and someone that people in South Florida know very well, Marty Kiar, who is the Broward County Property Appraiser. He's definitely a person on the move.
He's caffeinated.
He's highly caffeinated. Reminded me a little bit of Danielle Blake with her Red Bulls. He had coffee and Red Bulls and
Diet Coke.
And Diet Coke. And listen, I don't know if he has Cuban coffee, but don't give that guy Cuban coffee. I mean, or maybe we should. He might solve all the world's problem, but the energy is tremendous. I really thought that there was a lot of great insight that was shared, but something that I mentioned, other than Marty, who is an elected official and of course was selected by the voters in Broward, I don't know who hired all the other 3 individuals, but they did a great job because it really feels that Broward County is in great hands with these, leaders in their own important positions.
Well, and they all talked about how collaborative, like they all collaborate, they all talk together, They all knew each other and were very friendly with each other. Yeah. And they said that it's because they don't obviously work in a vacuum, and what happens on the interstate affects the port and vice versa, and the airport, etc., and the property appraiser, obviously. Yeah. So it was great, and you could tell that they had good working relationships. And
you know what, Jennifer, when we talk about transportation, people talk about arteries, but it's really all about connectivity. Mm-hmm. And I really like the fact that we had someone from the seaport, someone from the airport, and then someone that talked about actual land, transportation. But I really enjoyed that then we had Marty there because he was talking about how all those things interconnect to affect property values, how they affect lifestyle, how they affect the value of the location. And so I thought that they brought it in together, and there were a lot of key insights that were shared in the presentation that I thought we would, go over. One of them had to do with population search, which, they spoke about what happened to Broward County really before the pandemic, ever since 2019. But as we all know, in every county, probably in the country, but more specifically here in South Florida and in Florida overall, we saw that there were certain trends that were already there, as they mentioned in 2019, that got accelerated as a result of COVID. Broward County is home to about 2 million people, that's more than 13 U.S. states. It attracts millions of people annually. And the population growth is forecasted to continue, driving a 30% increase in travel demand models, which, I thought was really interesting. We obviously see that in South Florida. And I think someone, by way of an introduction, mentioned how the first quarter of this year, and we mentioned that when we did our update, there were, more significant size commercial transactions happening in Broward, than they did in Fort Lauderdale specifically, than they did here in Miami-Dade County.
Well, and it's interesting because I've always, I've been here 34 years, and I always found it strange that people would come to Miami and visit Miami. They would talk about Miami, they would talk about Palm Beach, but Broward was always kind of this hole in the middle of a donut that I felt like people kind of jumped over Broward for whatever reason. And even though we had a lot of population growth in Broward, especially in Western Broward, and Marty did point out that most of Broward is Everglades, so they're site constrained. They need to start building up because they don't have land.
Right.
But the pandemic, and I think the Bright Line also helped, and they didn't talk too much about the Bright Line, but I do think that those two things really helped put Broward on the same path of growth, right? Because now they're in the ideal position because they're being sandwiched by the cost of living refugees from Palm Beach and from Miami-Dade County.
No doubt.
And that's the perfect place. Broward, same lifestyle, same access, great restaurants. Marty was saying, years ago, you would go if you wanted to go out for a nice dinner or date or celebration. Your only options were Las Olas. But now, what did he say? There's like 33 different cities in Broward County, and that now every little city has their own special places to go and their nice restaurants, and that the level of the lifestyle has really increased while still keeping kind of that small town feel.
And I like the because the conversation was all data based. So one of the things that they mentioned was that it used to be that historically the areas that were getting that level of investment on commercial real estate was downtown Las Olas.
Right.
And that's really what was getting all the attention from a commercial site. And there were hubs for high-end services, the restaurants, the experiential retail. And as the city has expanded, what they notice is that the development has become decentralized, meaning that there are other aspects of the city that are demanding those services, and they are getting it because they're attracting it. And so now commercial sales are occurring in 5 different cities within Broward County rather than solely downtown. And that has been a trend that has started 5 years ago and continues to the day. So I thought that was an interesting dynamic. It reminded me of what we see and what we have seen over the last 10 years really in Miami-Dade County, which is that as population grew, interest in the city grew, and we have more density, that inevitably what has happened here is that we're becoming a city of neighborhoods. And it's hard to imagine, but not too long ago there wasn't a downtown Doral. There wasn't that level of development wasn't there. There wasn't a place where you have standalone great restaurants, great experiences, great places to shop, great places to enjoy a night out with the family or a night out, to go out on dates. That wasn't the place that you were always thinking, we got to go to the beach. We got to go to downtown. It was a different, and things have changed, and it looks like that's happening in Broward County as well.
Yeah, and I think that, all of this growth, obviously, in any area poses significant challenges, and therefore the traffic, the traffic that we've seen in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach increasing. And so that's why it was so important when all of these 3 talked about a lot of the projects that are going on to build the infrastructure to support that growth while still maintaining a good quality of life. And the 2 logistical challenges, other than, there was the 2/3 of Broward County is in the Everglades, which limits it to having to build up. It's also home to, we don't have a lot of public transportation. And they talked about how most of the public transportation is in the east north-south corridor. So a lot of the projects that FDOT is working on are more going, east-west. So I thought that was interesting.
I like how he explained that the district was from Broward all the way to Indian River County.
Right.
I mean, and that there's a $6 billion investment being made right now in transportation. They've seen the increase in traffic 30%, but there seems to be a very intentional approach that they want to keep the feeling of Broward County to be less hectic than Miami. I think that was a phrase that was started.
They said that over and over. And I just want to clarify, the $6 billion is the $6 billion industry in transportation from Broward all the way up. The amount of money that they're spending to redo that I-95, 595 interchange is over $500 billion. Right. So the $6 billion was the value of our transportation industry.
Understood.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that that presentation from Port Everglades. Dr. Jacinthe was just tremendous, and just to set the table, she took out she brought a prop. She took out a bottle of wine of Moscato from Italy and basically proceeded to say, what does that bottle represent in regards to getting logistically that bottle into the port, getting it processed in the port, getting it out of the port into the transportation, so that eventually it makes it into the hotels, it makes it into the restaurants, it makes it into your local store where you can buy it. And I thought that was a great way to piece it together. And one of the things about how impactful the Port Everglades is, but for people in Miami-Dade County, I think they learned this in 2023, and it wasn't an issue with the port. It just so happens that I asked her the question, but in 2023, we had this major flooding event in Broward, in Fort Lauderdale, and
shut down the airport for
close to a week. It shut down the airport, right, and then the trucks couldn't come in and out, because what people didn't realize, I don't think most people realize, that the majority of the gas for the gas stations here in South Florida actually come to Port Everglades, and how much that infrastructure is impactful to all of South Florida. And I think people realized it back then, and of course they're working to make sure that never happens again. But I thought she was great at illustrating what the port is working on, what the future looks like for the port, but more importantly, how interconnected that is to other parts of South Florida.
Well, for example, she said that there's over 1,200 trucks per day just for the petroleum. An additional 5 to 1,000 for cargo that impact traffic, especially on 595. Right. And with a lot of the oil distribution and gas, that she says that goes actually through pipelines to Miami-Dade, right? So the truck traffic is more for up north. But that to me was crazy. And one of the things that I loved about her and what she said about using that bottle of Moscato, she says it's not just about the bottles trip, it's about the people who interact with that bottle and make sure that all that happens. It's the crane up, starting with your crew on the ship and the captain and the crane operators and the truck drivers and all of that. And she definitely had a people focus, which I'll close with some of the comments that they made about that.
No, and I think that they are, one of the things she mentioned was about the cruise business in Fort Lauderdale, which I found it interesting, because there are some cruise lines that actually, some major cruise lines that actually made the move from Miami-Dade to Broward. I think Disney was one of them, if I'm not mistaken. And one of the things she mentions is that in a 7-month period, they have 4 million cruise passengers in Port Everglades, and they're expecting over the next 10 to 15 years that number to go to 6 million. One thing she mentioned that I thought was really, really interesting is that they have meetings with all of the major cruise lines in the world, and that the major cruise lines have 80 new cruise ships on order.
Already.
And that means, it takes years to build a cruise ship. And so the idea is that they're only expecting that to grow. I thought it was really interesting, because I love when people give you the macro number and then they bring it down to the micro. 23.9 million cruise passengers globally, right? and we have 4 million. I don't remember how much we process, leave out of Miami, but it's a significant number. Yeah. I believe higher than this. It's incredible how much. And she mentioned something about the 80 ships, that the majority of those destinations were in the Caribbean.
Right.
So we're going to get them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure. For sure.
And for anyone who's a commercial broker who's listening, they're always looking for land to expand because they're landlocked and they need the space. They need the logistical space.
Right. And they were talking about multimodal facilities to focus on connecting the different modes to get people to and from places. Like, how do you get people from the airport to the cruise terminal, right? How do you get people from the train to the airport, et cetera? So I thought that it was very thoughtful, and that's where they're all collaborating and working together. Like, where can we do that? How do we make that effective? Where's the best place to put that? And to your point, between the passengers, the passenger traffic and the cargo traffic, the Port Everglades, and we've said this before, is a huge economic engine for our area. $26.5 billion in total economic investment activity just from the last fiscal year. Yeah. So, and I think it's probably going to be just as high this year.
Well, that's another thing. The airport goes from, basically processing 26 million visitors to 37 million in a 5-year period.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's an incredible increase. I mean, to add that 10 million in that 5 year is tremendous, generating an economic impact of about $37 billion, which is incredible. And now they've had to kind of refocus or recalibrate how they are going to grow, right? Because they've grown so fast. And now they have to address their aging infrastructure. They got to look at potential traffic impact. One of the things he mentioned that I thought was really interesting is addressing the noise pollution that is created by the planes that are landing. And apparently there was a project before where some houses got impact windows to help them with the noise. Right. But now they're doing other environmental impacts to kind of really understand how it is that we can have a growing airport, but at the same time not to disrupt the lifestyle of those that live around the airport.
Right. They want to be a good neighbor for sure.
Right.
And so just think about that. And you and I have talked about this before, and how transportation and logistics for all of South Florida is such a huge industry. Airport, $37 billion. Port, $26.5 billion, and that is just in Broward County. Yeah. Now add in that Palm Beach also has an airport. Right. They also have a port, and Miami-Dade, obviously, port, exactly. A port and Miami International. So it's just huge, the economic impact that our logistics and transportation infrastructure has in our county.
And it certainly seems that they really understand that it's really about the last mile. It's not just getting the goods here. It's not just getting the passengers here. It's about, having a focus on connecting people from the airport to the port, to the convention center, to throughout the county, to the hotels, all of those things, and how they envision this Broward commuter rail being the backbone of that, able to connect.
Right, and filling in where Brightline doesn't, right? Because Brightline has less stops. Right. So how do you make that more connective? I wanted to ask, because my thing is still the east-west. It's like, great, we're doing all this great stuff for north-south, but the reality is that a lot of our housing is on the west side. Yeah. And one of the things that I thought about how they work together is what Dr. Yacente said. And it was, what is the consumer, what are the employees, what are the people experiencing in each of our facilities? What are they experiencing driving by our facilities? What are they experiencing as they come up to our facilities? Because she said at the end of the day, everything that we do is for the people that either use our services or need the materials that come through our port, or the cruise passengers who go on. And she said, I don't look at it as a cruise passenger. I look at the 80-year-old grandmother going on and celebrating her 80th birthday with her family. Yeah. I look at the anniversary traveler. I look at the port worker who's unloading the docks and feeding his kids. So I loved that she really took a comprehensive look at the people and the effect that her facility has on the people that interact with it, whether by choice or by happenstance, if you happen to be stuck on 595.
And you know what? Going to the point that we made earlier, they were all very, very quality, prepared. I'm going to say leaders because, to be in those positions, you have to be a leader. And what I love about it is that they see that the future outlook for growth, responsible growth, effective, efficient, good growth in Broward is by having these interagency collaboration. And you could tell that they've worked with each other. You could tell that they communicate with each other consistently. And so having that strong collaboration between the county commission, the city government, the Florida Department of Transportation, Port Everglades, the airport, to address the growth challenges, having a master plan, right? A vision for what all of those factors, the Everglades, the Port Everglades, the airport, how they're going to manage expansion, how they're going to extensively get public and stakeholder input to make sure that they build or that they grow the people that live in Broward want, that, they understand that they got to expand vertically. They have to provide a diversification of offerings, and they have to manage growth, but at the same time, they want to preserve that comfortable lifestyle that they're known for. They want to avoid the stress that is seen in neighborhood areas like Miami. Again, they brought it up. And, and I can completely understand what they're talking about. It really feels like they were, growing up, there were always these sleepy towns, as we call them.
Right.
That, I think, it's long gone.
And it's funny, it's true. I mean, I can totally relate with them because when I'm driving back from Orlando, when I'm coming from Orlando to Miami, it's like, oh, I'm up in Indian, I'm up in Stewart and, Port St. Lucie, and I'm totally relaxed, loose hands on the steering wheel. I get into Palm Beach, I hold on a little tighter. I get into Broward, a little bit tighter, paying more attention. I get into Miami, and I am white-knuckled. My head's going back and forth. I'm waiting for the people doing 195 on the freeway. So what he said is true, and it is. You look at the little towns of Davie and Southwest Ranches and all the little individual neighborhoods, and you can understand them kind of wanting to keep the slower pace while still having the economic growth.
It's really interesting to me because I thought about this. Don't tell me why my, gray matter is just the synopsis are shooting this way, but there's a great movie that I can't believe I'm going to call it an old movie because it's from 1993, but I guess it is an old movie. It's called, I know. It's called Wrestling.
Was it in color?
It was in color. It was called Wrestling Hemingway, and Wrestling Ernest Hemingway. It's a story that takes place about these two older retired gentlemen, but it's a story that takes place in South Florida, and they show parts of Miami and parts of the Keys and parts of Broward, and you see that sleepy town in 93. You see, not a lot of traffic, you see a lot of things that you would not, the density of the buildings, the infrastructure in place, those days are not here. They no longer exist because you accommodate for growth, and it feels sometimes that everybody has discovered, certainly Miami, but when people say Miami, we always say Miami has an incredible brand because sometimes they are talking from Palm Beach all the way down to the Keys, south of Okeechobee, and they just be like,
Okeechobee is Miami.
And so it's just crazy how those things happen. But again, it was a wonderful event, and I'm so glad that they put it together. I love these city spotlight ideas, or the ideas of picking out an important topic and how interconnected it was. And there was a group of a mixed group of people in the event that were both, commercial and residential. I think everybody got a lot out of it. I will say Marty was good about talking about an issue that we're not really going to dive into, but about, the current conversation we're having about property taxes.
All taxes across the board. Right. Property taxes, sales taxes, every kind of tax.
Yeah, I thought he gave a really good summary of the issues and how that issue is being studied and decisions that voters are most likely going to have to make next year. But I thought it was great, and I love that he gave a shout out to the RPAC and the involvement of realtors
and what it
the
meant to him when
right.
he was a legislator and how we educated him on so many issues. Well, not just him, but the whole legislature on issues in 2006 when the economy took a dive. If you guys ever get a chance to go to these spotlights, I can guarantee you're going to get so much information out of it. The association does a great job. They highlight an area.
Right.
It could be Homestead. We've done Homestead. We've done Coral Gables. We've done all sorts of different little cities. I think we did Pembroke Pines this year. We did Coral Springs. I mean, we've done so many spotlights. And this one we did transportation and logistics. I think we did one on airports.
That's right.
Where we had the heads of both airports come and talk.
That's right.
No,
and I will say one more thing about Marty and his Broward County Appraiser's Office. They are an incredible resource. They will answer the phone. They will speak to. They love speaking to realtors. They love giving information and getting information. They also have great data on valuations. They understand valuations on not only residential but on commercial. I've been in meetings with Marty and his team where they had the numbers and they had them cold, dead cold, just a bullseye on how they're interpreting the numbers and how they're seeing it. So again, kudos to them. But if you're a broker out there, if you're an investor, hey, reach out. It's an office that is there to be of service. He doesn't collect taxes. He's just there to evaluate properties. And he loves hearing from people to make sure that they're doing the right
and he will work with
that.
you if you disagree with the valuation on commercial. He talks about how they evaluate the property, but they meet with owners all the time to go over their numbers versus maybe what the appraiser's office has.
Sure.
So, he's super fantastic. Reachable, and they have the tax estimator. And if you don't feel comfortable with the tax estimator online, because that's mostly for residential, he says, write to our office, tell us the property, tell us what you're planning on doing there, and we can give you a pretty decent estimate of what your taxes are going to be. So,
well, that's fantastic. I also want to say it was great that we got to spend the day together.
Yes, finally.
I love it.
Finally, because you've been on the move.
I know. Listen, I got it. Anyhow, guys.
Moving and grooving. Isn't there a song like that?
Yes, it is. Okay. If not, you just invented it and now it exists. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Between Two Chairs. We really appreciate you listening in, all the comments. Please, send us any topic specifically that you want us to cover relating to commercial real estate, demystifying commercial real estate. We pride ourselves in talking not only about those topics, but also highlighting what is happening in South Florida on commercial real estate and really all of real estate, because it's all interconnected. So thank you again for listening, and until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.